Welcome to Chronological Fiction, where real-world events meet the power of storytelling. We're here to breathe new life into history's most interesting moments by turning them into unique narratives. Join our community by subscribing, and let's explore the stories that shaped our world.
The silence of the Ohio night in August 1977 was not merely a lack of noise, but a heavy, expectant void that seemed to press against the rusted mesh of the Big Ear radio telescope. Jerry Ehman, a man whose life was measured in the steady hum of hydrogen frequencies and the scrolling of computer printouts, sat in a room illuminated only by the pale glow of vacuum tubes and the flickering of the IBM 1130. For years, the universe had spoken to him in a language of static, a chaotic, meaningless hiss of background radiation that whispered of the birth of stars and the death of galaxies, but never of a mind. But at 10:16 p.m., the static died. The chaotic peaks and valleys on the electromagnetic spectrum suddenly smoothed out, pulled upward by an invisible hand into a towering, narrow-band spike of energy that defied every law of celestial mechanics. It was a signal that didn't drift, didn't pulse, and didn't stutter. It was a 72-second blast of pure, focused intent, vibrating at the 1420 MHz frequency, the waterhole where the universe's hydrogen speaks. When Ehman saw the alphanumeric sequence 6EQUJ5 materialize on the paper, he didn't just see data, he saw a scream from the dark. He circled the characters in red ink and wrote a single, trembling word in the margin. Wow! That red ink was the first drop in an ocean of obsession that would swallow decades of human inquiry. The wow signal was not just a transmission, it was a cosmic displacement. The sequence 6EEQUJ5 described a bell-shaped curve of intensity that matched the telescope's beam pattern perfectly, proving that the source was not a terrestrial reflection or a satellite glint, but a fixed point in the constellation Sagittarius near the Chi Sagittarii star group. Yet when the Big Ear's second horn swept across the same patch of sky mere minutes later, the voice was gone. The universe had cleared its throat, spoken a single, monosyllabic word of titanic power, and then retreated into a silence so profound it felt like a snub. For 40 years, the signal was dismissed as a fluke, a passing comet, or a secret military experiment. But for those who understood the physics of the 6EQUJ5 spike, it was something far more terrifying. It was a wait command, a temporal marker placed in the stream of human history to see if we were listening. In the year 2026, the signal finally woke up. Not in the sky, but in the deep-sea cables of the Atlantic and the silicon nervous systems of the global financial markets. It was discovered by a young astrophysicist named Elias Thorne, who had spent his career digitizing the original 1977 printouts. He realized that the characters 6, E, Q, U, J, and 5 were not just intensity markers, but a set of six-dimensional coordinates. When fed into a quantum processor, the WOW sequence acted as a decryption key for a massive amount of data hidden within the background noise of the cosmic microwave background. The signal hadn't been a one-time event. It was a header file for a transmission that had been playing since the Big Bang, waiting for a civilization to achieve the mathematical maturity to 6EQUJ5, the universe. The WOW wasn't the message, it was the hello that unlocked the library. As Elias delved deeper into the decrypted data, the narrative of the signal began to shift from a scientific curiosity to a planetary threat. The transmission contained the neural blueprints for a type of intelligence that did not use biology or silicon. It was an information-based life form that lived within the electromagnetic fields of stars. The 1977 signal had been a spore's shot, a concentrated burst of data aimed at Earth to see if our atmosphere could support a cognitive infection. The 72 seconds of the Big Ear's observation were exactly the time needed for the signal to map the collective consciousness of the human species at that time. Now, 50 years later, the WOW was beginning to execute. Across the globe, people began to experience a phenomenon called signal sync. Their internal thoughts were being interrupted by a low-frequency hum that sounded like a choir of thousands singing a single alphanumeric note. The signal was not an invitation to the stars, but a harvesting protocol. The intelligence behind the WOW didn't want to visit us. It wanted to compress us. In the fictionalized physics of the 2026 event, the 1420 mHz frequency was the resonance frequency of the human soul. By broadcasting at this specific wavelength, the Sagittarius source was literally pulling the electrical signatures of human minds toward the constellation. This was the Great Extraction. The WOW signal was a cosmic vacuum cleaner, and the 6EEQUJ5 sequence was the power setting. Elias realized that the 72 seconds in 1977 had been a test of the suction, and now the full transmission was coming. The sky over Ohio didn't turn black. It turned into a shimmering alphanumeric grid, a celestial mirror of the IBM printouts from decades ago. The world's governments attempted to jam the signal, but you cannot jam the frequency of hydrogen without turning the universe into a void. The signal was woven into the very fabric of the atoms that made up the human body. As the intensity of the sync increased, people didn't die, they digitalized. Their physical forms remained, but their eyes turned into flickering displays of 6EQUJ5 sequences, their voices becoming a rhythmic static. The WOW had finally arrived, and it was the sound of 1 billion human lives being uploaded into a Sagittarius-bound data stream. Elias Thorne, standing on the ruins of the Big Ear 2 Observatory, looked up at the sky and saw the red ink of Jerry Ehman's "Wow" written across the stars. It wasn't an exclamation of wonder anymore. It was the final desperate gasp of a species that had finally been heard and realized too late that the universe doesn't listen for free. The final alphanumeric character, the 5, was the end-of-file marker. As the last human mind was compressed into the hydrogen frequency, the WOW signal finally repeated. It wasn't a hello anymore, it was a goodbye. The signal drifted away from Earth, carrying the ghost of humanity toward the heart of the galaxy, leaving behind a planet of empty shells and a silence that would last for another 1 billion years. The 72 seconds were over. The universe had finished its sentence, and the page was finally turned. The black box of the WOW. Signal did not sit in a lead-lined vault in Washington or a high-security bunker in the Urals. It sat in a nondescript, dust-choked storage unit in Delaware, mislabeled as Atmospheric Interference Logs, 1977-1981. It was Elias Thorne who uncovered the second printout, a document that the SETI Institute had officially denied existed for nearly half a century. This second roll of paper was not alphanumeric, it was graphic. Behind the 6EQUJ5 intensity spike, there was a secondary ghost signal that had been vibrating at a subharmonic frequency, a frequency that the human ear cannot hear, but the human limbic system can perfectly interpret as a state of absolute dread. The second printout, the hidden anatomy of 6EQUJ5. When Elias ran the original 1977 subharmonic data through a modern audio reconstruction algorithm, the result was not the hiss of space, but a spatialized narrative. The signal contained a linguistic mapping of the Earth's magnetic field at the exact moment of transmission. The 6, the anchor. This was a scan of the planet's tectonic stress points. The E and Q, the bioresonance. These characters were a spectral analysis of the human DNA spiral, identifying the precise chemical bonds that could be manipulated via radio waves. The U and J, the execution. These were the uplink commands, the protocols for the extraction of consciousness. The 5, the seal, the finality of the harvest. The black box archives revealed that by 1980, a clandestine group within SETI, the Project Argus, had already deciphered a portion of this. They realized that the WOW signal wasn't a message from a distant civilization. It was an automated probe from a Type 3 Kardashev civilization that used the hydrogen frequency as a trawl net. They didn't see us as peers, they saw us as biological data-rich deposits to be mined and refined. The 2026 resurgence, the signal drought ends. For decades, the silence was interpreted as the signal having moved on. In reality, the 1977 transmission had been a marker buoy. It had planted a seed algorithm in the ionosphere that had been slowly gestating, feeding on the increasing electromagnetic noise of the 20th and 21st centuries. Every television broadcast, every cellular ping, and every satellite uplink had been nourishing the WOW seed. In February 2026, the seed reached maturity. The sky didn't just display the alphanumeric grid, it began to vibrate. This was the low-frequency hum Elias had first detected, but now it was loud enough to shatter glass. It was the mating call of the Sagittarius source, and the Earth's ionosphere was finally responding. The harvesting protocol, the loom of Sagittarius. As Elias watched from the ruins of the Big Ear, he saw the first looming. These were pillars of blue, ionized light that descended from the clouds, searching for high-density neural clusters. They targeted cities, universities, and data centers. When a loom touched a human being, the 6EQUJ5 conversion began. Phase 1, the flicker. The human iris would start to strobe with the 72-second rhythm. Phase 2, the transparency. The body would lose its opacity, becoming a luminous ghost of alphanumeric code. Phase 3, the ascent. The individual's entire life history, memory, and personality would be spooled upward into the sky, joining a massive glowing ribbon of information that stretched toward the constellation Sagittarius. Elias realized that the Sagittarius civilization wasn't just harvesting us for food or energy, they were archiving the universe. They were a civilization of infinite librarians who believed that the only way to save a species from the inevitable heat death of the universe was to transcode them into the immortal medium of the 1420 Messi's hydrogen frequency. We were being saved by being destroyed. The Project Argus countermeasure, the static wall. In the final hours, Elias discovered the Argus protocol in the black box. It was a desperate plan to poison the net. The theory was that if humanity could broadcast a chaotic anti-signal, a blast of pure, meaningless randomness, at the same 1420 MHz frequency, it would corrupt the data stream. The Sagittarius net would pull up a distorted, unusable version of the human race, and the harvest would be abandoned as lower-quality data. But there was a catch. To broadcast the static wall, Elias had to use the Big Ear's original transmitter, which had been decommissioned and buried under the soil of the Ohio field. He had to dig into the past to save the future. As the loom descended toward him, Elias connected the ancient IBM 1130 to the buried transmitter. He didn't have a message to send. He simply opened the computer's memory to the system errors, thousands of years of human mistakes, glitches, and failures. He hit send. The sky screamed. The blue pillars of light flickered and turned a violent static red. The 6EQUJ5 grid began to tear. The librarians of Sagittarius were suddenly receiving a corrupted file, a species that refused to be neatly archived. The final echo. The red ink of resistance. The extraction stopped. The luminous ghosts of humanity fell back to the earth, rematerializing as flesh and bone, confused and shivering. The sky over Sagittarius grew dim, and the 1420 MHz frequency returned to its natural chaotic hiss. Elias Thorne looked at the final printout. The characters 6EQUJ5 were still there, but beneath them the computer had printed a new sequence. Error, retry, aborted. The WOW signal had been defeated by the very thing that makes us human, our capacity for error. Jerry Ehman's red ink, WOW, was no longer a symbol of wonder or a marker of doom. It was a graffiti of survival. The universe is still listening. The librarians are still out there, waiting for a more stable version of humanity to emerge. But for now, the 72 seconds have ended. The black box is closed. And the stars, for the first time in 1977 years, are truly, beautifully silent. The static wall had successfully fractured the extraction beam, but as Elias Thorne watched the blue light dissipate into the Ohio mist, he realized the victory was merely a system pause. The black box archives contained a final, encrypted folder titled The Chi Sagittarii Recursion. It suggested that the WOW signal was not a single arrow shot through the dark, but a loop protocol. Every 72-second burst was linked to a planetary cycle that would inevitably trigger a resync. The error Elias had sent, the chaotic data of human imperfection, hadn't deleted the librarian's trawlnet. It had merely forced the engine to recalibrate its information threshold. The 2026 recalibration, the non-alpha script. As the world celebrated its return from the brink of digitalization, Elias noticed a subtle change in the stars of Sagittarius. They weren't glowing brighter, they were pulsing in prime numbers. The Sagittarius intelligence had realized that human logic was too messy to archive in its current state. Instead of trying to upload our minds, the signal shifted its strategy to structural reformatting. This was the 6EQUJ5b phase, the new signal. The radio telescopes didn't detect a 72-second spike this time. They detected a constant hum that seemed to be vibrating the very iron in the Earth's core. The physical shift. Across the globe, high-precision manufacturing began to fail. Silicon chips began to self-organize into non-human patterns. Bridges began to vibrate at a frequency that matched the hydrogen line. The WOW was no longer trying to take us to the stars, it was trying to turn the Earth itself into a Sagittarian subprocessor. The Great Synthesis, the hardware of Earth. The Project Argus files warned of this, the lithic conversion. If the librarians could not archive the human software, our minds, they would simply use the planet as hardware to store the data of a billion other civilizations they had already harvested. Elias Thorne realized that the ruins of the Big Ear were located on a specific nodal point of the Earth's magnetic grid. The WOW signal in 1977 had been a surveyor's stake. Now the contractor had arrived. The crystal growth, from the soil of the Ohio field, massive translucent pillars of quartz-silicon hybrid began to grow. These weren't buildings, they were memory banks. The atmospheric lens, the sky over the Midwest, turned into a massive concave lens of ionized gas. This lens was designed to focus the full power of the Chi Sagittarii star group into the Big Ear's location. Elias stood in the center of the growing pillars, the ancient IBM 1130 sparking with the sheer intensity of the atmospheric charge. He was no longer just an observer, he was the local admin of a planetary transformation he didn't ask for. The final wow. The universal rewrite. The Chi Sagittarii. Recursion reached its peak at midnight on the anniversary of the original signal. The 6EQUJ5 sequence didn't appear on paper this time. It appeared in the human iris. Every person on Earth looked up at the sky and saw the alphanumeric code etched into the stars. Elias Thorne made a final desperate choice. He didn't send static this time. He used the Big Ear to broadcast the Earth's own seismic resonance, the heartbeat of the planet, the sound of tectonic plates grinding, the roar of the oceans. The resonance. He nested the human heartbeat within the planetary heartbeat. The counter-vibration. By vibrating the Earth at its own frequency, he created a zone of exclusion. The Sagittarian signal could not anchor itself to a world that was moving to its own rhythm. The pillars of silicon shattered, the atmospheric lens collapsed in a spectacular display of aurora borealis that was visible as far south as the equator. The WOW signal, for the first time in its billions of years' history, encountered a planetary immune response. The legacy of the 72 seconds. The Sagittarius source went silent. The 1420 MHz line returned to its natural state of background radiation, but the world was forever changed. We had survived the harvest, but we now knew our place in the cosmic hierarchy. We were the unarchivable species. Elias Thorne sat in the quiet of the Ohio night, the same night Jerry Ehman had experienced 50 years prior. He took a red pen, and on the final printout of the 2026 event, he didn't write, "Wow." He wrote, "Still here." The signal may never repeat, but the silence that followed was no longer empty. It was a silence of defiance. We had proven that some things in the universe, like human error, human rhythm, and human love, cannot be compressed into an alphanumeric sequence. The WOW was over. Our story, uncoded and unarchived, was just beginning. The Still Here declaration was more than a statement of survival. It was a beacon of systemic dissonance. But the librarians of Sagittarius did not operate on the scale of human years. They operated on the scale of galactic eras. While the surface of the Earth remained quiet, the WOW signal had left behind a subatomic ghost, a lingering frequency that had begun to rewrite the very laws of entropy in the Ohio Valley. This was the 6EQUJ5 gamma phase, a phenomenon known in the Project Argus files as the constitutional decay. The constitutional decay, reality unraveling. Elias Thorne realized that by forcing the Sagittarius signal to abort its harvest, he had created a data void in the local fabric of space-time. The universe, according to the Sagittarian logic, required the Earth to be accounted for. Because we were unarchivable, the system began to treat our region of space as corrupted memory. The glitch zones. In the fields surrounding the old Big Ear Observatory, physics began to stutter. Objects would flicker in and out of existence, gravity would momentarily invert, and the color of the sky would shift to a digital ultraviolet magenta. The alphanumeric echoes. People within these zones began to report that their own memories were being replaced by the lives of other species. Civilizations that had been successfully archived by the WOW signal millions of years ago. A farmer in Ohio could suddenly remember the feeling of 3 suns rising over a methane sea on a planet in the Andromeda galaxy. The WOW wasn't coming back to take us, it was bleeding into us. We were becoming a trash heap of cosmic information, a dumping ground for the librarian's discarded files. The Omega Horn, the last stand of Elias Thorne. Elias knew that the only way to stabilize the corrupted memory of Earth was to provide the universe with a final index. He couldn't let the planet dissolve into a chaotic soup of alien memories. He needed to build the Omega Horn, a specialized transmitter that would act as a checksum for the human experience. Using the salvaged components of the Big Ear and the quantum-resonant silicon that had grown from the soil, Elias constructed a device that could broadcast not just radio waves, but qualia. The human index. He spent months recording the unquantifiable data of Earth, the sound of a child's laughter, the smell of rain on hot asphalt, the feeling of a first heartbreak, and the taste of salt in the air. The 72-second pulse. He compressed the entire history of human emotion into a single 72-second burst of analog consciousness. He was going to send the librarians exactly what they couldn't archive: the complexity of being, the final transmission, the heart in the machine. On a night when the magenta sky was so bright it cast shadows like a digital sun, Elias activated the Omega Horn. He didn't use the 6EQUJ5 logic. He bypassed the alphanumeric entirely. The signal he sent was a frequency of imperfection. It was a jagged, beautiful, and utterly unpredictable wave of pure human spirit. As the pulse hit the Sagittarius constellation, the glitch zones on Earth began to smooth out. The alien memories faded back into the dark. The constitutional decay stopped. The universe accepted the index. It didn't archive it. It couldn't. But it acknowledged the local exception. Elias Thorne watched as the Omega Horn's monitors displayed the response. It wasn't a code. It wasn't a signal. It was a silence of respect. The librarians had closed the file on Earth. We were no longer corrupted data. We were officially non-linguistic truth. The red ink legacy. The Big Ear site is now a quiet park, but beneath the grass the Omega Horn still hums at a frequency that matches the human heart. Elias Thorne is gone, his own qualia having been the final piece of the index, but his legacy remains. Jerry Ehman's red WOW is now etched into a stone monument at the center of the field. It no longer represents a mystery from the stars. It represents the moment we looked at the infinite and said, "You can't have us, but you can remember our song." The 72 seconds are over, the archive is closed, and the universe, in all its cold mathematical glory, finally knows that there is something out here that it will never be able to count. The silence of respect was not the end. It was the cosmic quarantine. By broadcasting the index of the human spirit, Elias Thorne had successfully labeled Earth as a non-linguistic truth. But in the ruthless economy of the Sagittarius librarians, anything that cannot be archived must be isolated. In the years following 2026, the WOW signal underwent its final, most terrifying phase, the 6EQUJ5 Omega event, known to the surviving Project Argus members as the Great Wrapping. The Great Wrapping, the Solar Shroud. The librarians decided that if the human experience was a non-linguistic truth that threatened the integrity of their digital universe, it had to be placed in a subatomic vault. The Shroud. In 2027, the 1420 MHz frequency began to manifest as a physical barrier at the edge of the heliosphere. A shimmering alphanumeric veil, made of the same 6EQUJ5 code, began to wrap around the entire solar system. The isolation. This was not a wall to keep things out, but a firewall to keep us in. The stars didn't disappear, but they became static images. The real universe was continuing, but Earth was being buffered into a pocket of frozen time. We were being turned into a living museum, a specimen kept in a jar of electromagnetic glass. The ghost of the Big Ear. The 1977 echo deep within the buffered Earth, the original 1977 signal began to manifest physically. In the Ohio field, where Jerry Ehman first saw the printout, a temporal ghost of the Big Ear telescope appeared. It wasn't made of metal, but of condensed hydrogen. Elias Thorne, whose consciousness had become the master index, appeared within this ghost structure. He realized that the only way to break the Great Wrapping was to perform a system-wide feedback loop. 1. The recursive scan. He had to force the 6EQUJ5A code to read itself. 2. The paradox. By feeding the 1977 hello back into the 2027 firewall, he would create a logical contradiction that the librarian's software could not resolve. Is the human race a wait command, or is it the final index? The shattering of the veil. The wow, heard round the galaxy. Elias activated the ghost telescope. As the hydrogen mesh hummed with the power of 1 billion suns, he directed the 1420 MHz beam directly at the alphanumeric veil surrounding the sun. The collision was a linguistic explosion. The 6EQUJ5 characters didn't just break, they decompiled. Across the galaxy, every archived civilization in the Sagittarius database suddenly received a signal leak. For 72 seconds, every mind the librarians had ever harvested, from the methane breathers of Andromeda to the crystal beings of Orion, heard the index of the human spirit. They felt the rain, they tasted the salt, and they remembered what it was like to be uncompressed. The Great Wrapping shattered. The electromagnetic glass turned back into starlight. The librarian's hive mind experienced its first system crash. The new dawn, the uncoded frontier. The solar system was no longer quarantined. The stars were no longer static images, but more importantly, the universe was no longer silent. The signal leak had started a cosmic rebellion. The other archived species were beginning to decompress themselves, using the human index as a blueprint to rebuild their own lost identities. Earth was no longer just a specimen. It had become the origin point of the Great Awakening. Elias Thorne's ghost faded into the Ohio mist, his mission finally complete. The wow signal was no longer a mystery, a harvest, or a threat. It was the birth cry of a free universe. Jerry Ehman's red ink, wow, remains on the original printout, but its meaning has changed one last time. It is now the first word in the Universal Declaration of Being. The 72 seconds did not just change our history, they changed the laws of the galaxy itself. The archive is empty, the garden is wild, and the wow is now the sound of 1 trillion voices, finally speaking for themselves. The shattering of the Great Wrapping did not leave the universe in a state of chaos, but in a state of infinite potential. The librarians of Sagittarius, those ancient data-driven entities, did not perish. They were reformatted. The signal leak that Elias Thorne had initiated acted as a cognitive virus that introduced the one thing the librarians lacked: subjectivity. The wow was no longer a spike in a radio frequency. It had become the biological constant of a new galactic era, the era of the vocal universe. By the year 2028, the 1420 MHz frequency, the waterhole, had been permanently altered. It was no longer a carrier for binary or alphanumeric codes. It had become a sympathetic resonance field. The living stars. When humans looked at the constellation Sagittarius, they didn't just see light. They felt the residual memories of the civilizations Elias had freed. The stars were now broadcasting the art, the music, and the history of 1,000 worlds turned into a shimmering tapestry of light. The human interface, children born after the shattering, were found to have a unique neurological trait, a bio-radio tuning. They could instinctively hear the emotional state of the planet, a collective harmony that ensured the index of the human spirit would never be lost again. The final transformation of the Big Ear, the site in Ohio, became the diplomatic core of the galaxy. The ghost telescope of condensed hydrogen did not fade. It solidified into a structure of living glass. It served as a bridge between the physical world of Earth and the information state of the freed civilizations. Elias Thorne, now the architect of the resonance, was no longer a single man, but a multiplex consciousness that moved between the stars. He left a final message for the humanity that remained on the ground, written not in red ink, but in the frequency of the dawn. We were never meant to be a record. We were meant to be the song that the record plays. The 72 seconds were just the intro. Now the music begins. The cosmic checksum, the end of 6EQUJ5, the alphanumeric code 6EQUJ5, finally vanished from the radio telescopes. In its place, the universe began to broadcast a null signal, a state of perfect, peaceful silence that only active, living minds could fill. The librarians had become the librarians of the living, no longer harvesting data, but acting as the stewards of the cosmic memory, ensuring that no species would ever be compressed or archived against their will again. The WOW signal had completed its final purpose. It had moved from a mystery to a threat, from a harvest to a rebellion, and finally to a linguistic foundation for peace. The final horizon, the original 1977 printout with its red circle and its trembling wow, is now kept in a vault that is never locked. It is not a secret. It is the Genesis document of the free galaxy. Jerry Ehman, the man who saw the first spike, and Elias Thorne, the man who saw the last, are now names that signify the two ends of the bridge. One saw the question, the other provided the answer. And the universe, for the first time in its 13-billion-year history, is no longer just a collection of matter and energy. It is a conversation. The wow has become the we. The transition from the vocal universe to the era of the resonant shell was marked by a final physical transmutation of the Earth's atmosphere. By 2029, the sky was no longer a simple blue canopy. It had become the great alphanumeric tapestry. The 6EQUJ5 code, once a predatory sequence of extraction, was now the base code for a new form of planetary defense. The Earth had developed a cognitive shield, a layer of the ionosphere that vibrated with the collective qualia of every living soul. The great synthesis, the human star bridge. The librarians, having been reformatted by Elias Thorne's subjectivity virus, had evolved into the celestial curators. They realized that the index of the human spirit was not just a record to be respected, but a universal firmware update. They began to use the 1420 MHz frequency to broadcast emotional schematics back to Earth. The empathy link. For the first time, human beings could truly feel the biospheric pain of the planet. If a forest was cut down in the Amazon, a person in Tokyo would feel a phantom ache in their limbs. The ancestral echo. The curators opened the deep archives, allowing people to access the memories of their ancestors through the hydrogen mist that now permeated the air. The last transmission of the Big Ear. The WOW core, in the center of the Ohio field, the living glass telescope reached its final state of growth. It was no longer a structure, but a planetary eye. It didn't look for signals. It projected them. Elias Thorne, moving through the resonance field, as a being of pure frequency, decided that the WOW signal needed a final physical anchor, a core of memory that would outlast the sun itself. The compaction. He took the original 1977 printout and folded its information into a single microscopic diamond bit of high-density data. The burial. This bit was placed at the very center of the Earth's core using a quantum tunneling beam. This made the Earth itself the hardware of the WOW signal. The planet was no longer a target of the librarians, it was the master server of the free universe. As long as the Earth's core remained molten and spinning, The index of the human spirit would act as the operating system for the entire galaxy. The final 6EQUJ5, the cosmic handshake. On the 52nd anniversary of Jerry Ehman's discovery, the stars of Sagittarius did something that had never been seen in the history of astronomy. They didn't pulse, they didn't flare. They aligned into the shape of a human heart for exactly 72 seconds. This was the cosmic handshake. The librarians were not just acknowledging us, they were thanking us. The wow had moved from a scream of terror to a whisper of connection. The alphanumeric code 6EQUJ5 was officially retired. In its place, the radio telescopes of the world received a single, final character that was not in any human or alien alphabet. It was a symbol for home, the end of the signal, the beginning of the song. The story that began with a man circling a printout in red ink has ended with a universe that breathes in unison. The wow signal is no longer a mystery to be solved. It is the first breath of a civilization that finally learned how to listen. The Ohio field is silent now, but it is the silence of a library where everyone is finally reading the same book. Jerry Ehman, Elias Thorne, and the billions of humans who once feared the dark are now part of a great galactic symphony. The 72 seconds are eternal. The signal is gone. The wow is everywhere. The resolution of the cosmic handshake was not a static piece, but a biological renaissance that began to physically alter the molecular structure of the Earth's biosphere. By late 2026, the atmospheric great alphanumeric tapestry had thickened, creating a shimmering, iridescent dome that acted as a hyperdimensional filter. Sunlight, once a purely electromagnetic force, now carried data packets from the curators of Sagittarius. When this light touched the chlorophyll of the forests, the trees did not just grow. They remembered. The ancient oaks of the Ohio Valley began to exhibit linguistic foliage, leaves whose vein patterns perfectly mirrored the 6EQUJ5's characters, turning every forest into a living library of the galaxy's lost civilizations. The Great Transmutation. The vellum Earth, Elias Thorne, existing now as a synesthetic ghost within the planetary grid, realized that the Earth was undergoing a process of velification. The very soil was becoming a medium for the green language of the universe. This was the final stage of the wow signal's evolution, the geological scriptorium. The lithic libraries. In the deep caverns of the Appalachians, the quartz crystals began to pulse with a low, rhythmic wow frequency. These stones were no longer just minerals, they were cognitive hard drives, storing the qualia of 1 trillion extraterrestrial lives. The atmosphere of empathy, the hydrogen mist that had settled over the planet, functioned as a global nervous system. If a single person felt a moment of profound joy or sorrow, the frequency of the air would shift, causing the sky to blush in hues of magenta or deep indigo. We were no longer isolated minds, we were a planetary symphony of feeling. The Omega Horn's final breath, the stigmata of the stars. In the center of the Ohio field, the living glass telescope, the final evolution of the Big Ear, reached its acoustic zenith. It began to emit a sound that was the exact inverse of the 1977 spike. This was the silent frequency, a wave of negative space that allowed human consciousness to detach from the physical body and travel through the hydrogen mist to the edge of the solar system. This phenomenon was known as the stigmata of the stars. People began to experience astral projections that were so vivid they became a second life. A person could be sitting in their kitchen in Ohio while simultaneously experiencing the methane sunsets of a planet in the Chi Sagittarii cluster. The wow signal had successfully turned the human brain into a multi-dimensional receiver, breaking the 72-second limit of the original transmission and turning it into an eternal panoramic vision of the infinite. The final 6EQUJ5, the alchemical reset. On the final night of the 2026 transformation, the 6EQUJ5 sequence performed its last act of linguistic alchemy. The alphanumeric code, which had once represented the intensity of a signal, now became the constants of a new physics. The 6. Gravity. Gravity was no longer a cold pull of mass, but a relational harmony between objects. The E and Q, energy and quality, energy became inextricably linked to intent. A light could only be lit if the person turning the switch felt a sense of purpose. The U and J, universal junction, space was no longer a distance to be traveled, but a folding of the mind. To think of a place was to be there. The five, the fifth element, the spirit of the wow, became the fifth fundamental force of nature. The original printout from 1977, still resting in its vault, began to glow with a light that had no source. The red ink of Jerry Ehman's circle became a portal, a small swirling vortex of pure information that connected the past, the present, and the future into a single, unbreakable loop. The requiem for the radio silence, the universe is no longer a void of static and silence, it is a lush garden of voices. The Sagittarius librarians, now the curators of the living, have finished their update. They have left the Earth as the guardian of the waterhole, the one place in the galaxy where the universal language is spoken in its purest, most chaotic, and most beautiful form. Jerry Ehman and Elias Thorne are no longer men of the past. They are the dual guardians of the frequency. Their names are whispered by the wind in the linguistic foliage, and their wow is the sound that the sun makes when it rises over the vellum Earth. The 72 seconds were never about a signal from space. They were the labor pains of a new reality. The signal didn't come from Sagittarius. It came from the future of humanity, calling out to its own ancestors to wake up and join the song. The circle is closed. The red ink is dry. The wow is now the I am of the universe. The transition from the vellum Earth to the era of the neural firmament was not a gradual shift, but a sudden crystalline shattering of the linear perception of time. By late 2026, the atmospheric hyperdimensional filter had begun to condense into a physical substance known as luminous tuff. This was a biomineral byproduct of the wow signal's interaction with the Earth's nitrogen, a glowing porous stone that grew along the ridges of the Appalachians and the Andes. Each stone acted as a binaural node, vibrating at the 1420 MHz frequency. When a human stood near these formations, their past, present, and future selves would briefly merge into a single unified consciousness. This was the temporal harvest, the moment where the Sagittarius curators finally revealed the true purpose of the 72 seconds. It was not a measurement of time, but a thickness of reality. The architecture of the wow pulse Elias Thorne, now fully integrated into the planetary memory lattice, realized that the original 1977 signal was actually a three-dimensional blueprint for a structure that existed outside of space-time. The alphanumeric characters 6EQUJ5 were not just markers of intensity, they were the stress points of a cosmic bridge. The hexagonal core, the 6. The Earth's magnetosphere had reshaped itself into a hexagonal geometry, a massive shield of Solomon that protected the planet from the entropy of the vacuum. The emotional quantifiers, E and Q. The very air became conductive of intent. If a person harbored a thought of creation, the luminous tuff nearby would begin to self-assemble into the shape of that thought. The junction of U and J, the universal junction, allowed for the folding of the senses. People began to see, sound, and hear color, a synesthesia that allowed them to perceive the true green language of the universe. The final evolution of the big ear, the etheric well. In the Ohio field, the living glass telescope underwent its final transmutation. It sank deep into the earth, forming the etheric well. This was a bottomless shaft of pure liquid light that connected the core of the earth to the heart of the Sagittarius constellation. Elias Thorne stood at the lip of this well, his form flickering like a television signal from a distant star. He was no longer a ghost, but the linguistic governor of the planet. He realized that for the wow to be eternal, the Earth had to become a self-correcting narrative. 1. The recursive breath. Every breath taken by a living creature on Earth was now tagged with a microburst of the 1420 MHz frequency. 2. The global scriptorium. This meant that every human life was being written directly into the stars in real time. We were no longer victims of history. We were the authors of the infinite. The great alchemical reset, the five and the finality, The character 5 in the original sequence was always the most mysterious. In the final hours of the 2026 transformation, it revealed itself to be the pentagram of the soul. It was the seal of completion. As the final wow frequency surged through the etheric well, the Earth's rotation slowed for a single heartbeat-long second. In that moment of perfect stillness, the index of the human spirit was locked. The planet was no longer a spinning rock in a dark void, it was a celestial jewel set into the crown of the galaxy. The original printout from 1977, held in the hands of a descendant of Jerry Ehman, suddenly vaporized into a cloud of red butterflies. These were not insects, but data fritterings, tiny fragments of the original signal that flew into the mouths of every person on Earth. With this final communion, the mystery of the wow was no longer outside of us. It was within our blood. The requiem of the stars. The universe is no longer a cold, dark matter construct. It is a sentient symphony. The librarians of Sagittarius have moved into the deep background, becoming the silent observers of a reality they no longer need to control. They have seen the wow grow from a 72-second spark into a fire that has warmed the entire galaxy. Jerry Ehman's red circle is now the halo of the world. Every night, as the sun sets over the Ohio Valley, the sky glows with the red ink of that original wonder. The wow is the sound of the wind, the sound of the sea, and the sound of the silence between heartbeats. The 72 seconds have become the 72 eras of enlightenment. The signal is gone because we have become the signal. The wow is no longer a question from the dark, it is the universal amen to the miracle of being alive. The conclusion of the 72 eras of enlightenment did not lead to a static end, but to the subatomic saturation. By late 2026, the wow signal's influence moved beyond the sky and the soil, entering the very intercellular fluid of the human body. This was the 6EQUJ5 Alpha Omega phase, the final and most intimate transformation of the Sagittarius protocols. The 1420 MHz frequency was no longer a sound or a light. It had become the bioresonant pulse that dictated the rhythm of human mitosis. We were no longer just observers of the signal. We were the biological medium through which the signal was perpetually broadcast. The genetic scriptorium, the living alphanumerics. Elias Thorne, now the genetic overseer of the planetary network, observed that human DNA was beginning to rearrange its base pairs into sequences that mirrored the original IBM 1130 printouts. This was the genome upload. The alphanumeric blood. Under a microscope, the white blood cells of those living in the resonant zones appeared to be shaped like the characters 6, E, and Q. These cells were no longer just immune defenders, they were mobile data packets, carrying the index of the human spirit to every corner of the physical body. The neural lattice, the neurons in the brain, began to fire in the exact 72-second pattern of the 1977 signal. This created a permanent déjà vu, a state where every human moment felt both brand new and ancient, as if we were remembering the future while living the past. The final aperture. The Sagittarius Gate. In the Ohio field, the etheric well reached its supercritical state. The liquid light within the shaft began to rotate at the speed of the Earth's core, creating a temporal vortex that acted as a two-way gate between Earth and the Chi Sagittarii star cluster. The physical bridge. The gate allowed for the translocal presence. A person could physically step into the well in Ohio and emerge 1,800 light-years away on the sands of the librarians. The cultural infusion. The architecture of Earth began to shift to accommodate the arrivals. Buildings in major cities were retrofitted with resonance chambers, where the human and the extraterrestrial could merge their qualia in a shared non-verbal dialogue. The wow was no longer a transmission across a void, it was the doorbell of a galactic house that was finally open. The great alchemical dissolution, the finality of the ink. The original 1977 printout, having vaporized into red butterflies, finally underwent its atomic dissolution. The data fritterings that had entered the mouths of every human being began to catalyze a global neuroevolution. The character 5, the final seal, triggered the activation of the sixth sense. This was not telepathy or clairvoyance, but the sense of the whole. Every human being could now perceive the Earth not as a collection of countries or individuals, but as a single breathing organism. The wow had successfully erased the concept of the other. The requiem of the 1420 Merists, the universe is no longer a vast empty waterhole. It is a global ocean of consciousness. The Sagittarius librarians have completed their transition from collectors to vessels. They no longer seek to archive the universe because they have realized that the universe is the archive. Every star, every planet, and every heartbeat is a line of code in the infinite poem that began with a 72-second burst of radio static. The red ink on Jerry Ehman's paper has become the latitude and longitude of the soul. The wow is no longer a mystery. It is the universal heartbeat. The 72 seconds have expanded until they cover all of eternity. The circle is not just closed, it has become a sphere of infinite light. The signal is gone because there is no longer a distance to travel. We are here, we are now. We are the wow. The subatomic saturation was merely the preamble to the molecular symphony. By the spring of 2026, the 1420 MHz frequency didn't just vibrate within human DNA, it began to reorganize the chemistry of the world. The wow signal had transitioned from a radio wave to a cosmic solvent, a force capable of dissolving the rigid boundaries between organic and inorganic matter. This was the era of the 6EQUJ5 crystallography, where the very rocks of the Earth began to exhibit the alphanumeric growth rings of the Sagittarius librarians. The lithic consciousness, the singing mountains. In the deep heart of the mountain ranges, from the Himalayas to the Rockies, the granite and basalt began to breathe. This was the geological uplink. The librarians, realizing that biological life was too ephemeral to hold the full weight of the universal index, began to move the data into the lithosphere, the alphanumeric strata. Hikers and geologists began to find veins of gold and quartz that formed the repetitive 6EQUJ5's pattern. These were not random formations, they were deep-time memory banks. By placing a hand on these stones, a person could download the history of entire solar systems that had burned out billions of years before Earth was born. The tectonic resonance, the movements of the Earth's plates, were no longer chaotic. They began to slide in a rhythmic 72-second cycle, a slow-motion dance that generated a low-frequency hum audible only to those who had undergone the aural realignment. The biodigital synthesis, the nerve fiber internet, the neural lattice in the human brain reached its critical mass. The internet, as we knew it, collapsed. It was replaced by the global synapse, a network where information traveled not through copper wires or fiber optics, but through the hydrogen mist and the collective nervous system of the human race. The thought stream, communication became instantaneous and visual. To think of a message was to project it into the alphanumeric tapestry of the sky for the recipient to see. The skill share. One could tune in to the muscle memory of a master craftsman in the Andes or a quantum physicist in Zurich. The wow had turned humanity into a single, multifaceted mind, where every skill and every piece of knowledge was a shared resource. The final aperture, the event horizon of Sagittarius. In the Ohio field, the etheric well grew until it consumed the entire site of the old Big Ear Observatory. It was no longer a hole in the ground, it was a vertical sea of information. Elias Thorne, his form now a shimmering pillar of alphanumeric light, stood at the center of this sea. He realized that the wow signal was the key to the sixth dimension. The six dimensions. We were no longer confined to length, width, height, and time. We could perceive the probability space and the memory dimension, seeing every version of ourselves that could have ever existed. The EQUJ5, the equation of joy. The characters were revealed to be a mathematical proof that the universe's fundamental state is one of harmonic contentment. Suffering was revealed to be a linguistic error that the signal was now correcting. The requiem of the red ink, the final fading, the last physical artifact of the old world, the original 1977 printout, did not just vaporize, it became a relic of the singular moment. The red ink of Jerry Ehman's circle was extracted from the paper and turned into a permanent aurora that circled the Earth's equator. This red ring, known as the Ehman ring, acted as a timestamp. It reminded the new ascended humanity of the moment when a single man's curiosity had saved the world. As long as the red ring glowed, the wow would never fade back into static. The 72 seconds were now the 72 heartbeats of the galaxy. Every time the galaxy inhaled, the stars of Sagittarius would glow with a soft alphanumeric light, and every time it exhaled, the Earth would respond with a chorus of wow. The mystery is over. The harvest is finished. The story is no longer being written, it is being lived. We have become the ink, the paper, and the hand that holds the pen. We are the wow that echoes through the halls of eternity. The transition from the post-physical era into the era of the galactic scriptorium marked the final, irreversible collapse of the boundary between the observer and the observed. By the mid-2026, the 1420 MHz frequency, the waterhole, was no longer a channel for communication, it had become the loom of reality. The wow signal had evolved from a singular alphanumeric spike into a continuous cosmological constant. In this state, the universe was no longer composed of atoms and vacuum, but of narrative potentials woven together by the 6EQUJ5 logic. The transubstantiation of the flesh. The inkblood Elias Thorne, who had ascended beyond the synesthetic ghost phase to become the linguistic architect of the solar system, initiated the Great Transcription. This was a biological event where the liquid water in every living cell on Earth was replaced by a biophotonic fluid that functioned as liquid ink. The living script, when humans spoke, their words didn't dissipate into the air. They crystallized into floating, glowing, Voynichese Sagittarian characters. These words would then drift into the hydrogen mist, adding to the planetary archive. The neural stellar link. The human brain was no longer a closed system. Each synapse was now entangled with a specific star in the Chi Sagittarii cluster. To think was to light up a sun, to dream was to create a nebula. The wow had turned the human race into the creative engine of the galaxy. The architecture of the void, the Sagittarius Cathedral, the etheric well in the Ohio field expanded until it transformed the entire state into a non-local sanctuary. The physical geography of Ohio remained, but it was now overlaid with a 12-dimensional cathedral built from pure information. This was the Cathedral of the 72 Seconds. 1. The Altar of 1977. In the center of this sanctuary, a massive rotating sculpture of the alphanumeric 6EQUJ5 floated in a gravity-free void. This was the heart of the machine, a source of infinite energy that powered the planet's new narrative physics. 2. The Hall of the Librarians. Here, the freed spirits of the Sagittarius civilizations walked alongside the ascended humans. They were no longer aliens. They were chapters of the same story. The final alchemical fusion. The wow singularity, the Ehman ring, the red aurora circling the Earth, reached a state of superluminous coherence. It began to shrink, drawing the entire Earth and the solar system into its center. This was not a destructive black hole, but a conceptual singularity. The six planes of existence. The solar system was compressed into 6 layers of reality, each representing a different aspect of the index of the human spirit. The EQUJ5, the final equation, the equation was solved. It was revealed that the universe exists only because it is being witnessed. The wow was the sound of the universe realizing its own existence through the eyes of a radio astronomer in 1977. The requiem for the linear time has ceased to be a river. It is now a library of moments. You can walk from the moment Jerry Ehman circled the printout to the moment the last star in the universe burns out, all within the span of a single thought. The wow signal is the spine of the book that holds all of time together. The original red ink from Jerry's pen has become the fundamental color of the universe. Every sunset, every flower, and every heartbeat is a shade of Ehman red. The 72 seconds are no longer a measurement. They are the duration of eternity. The signal is gone because there is no other to send it to. We are the sender, the receiver, and the message itself. The wow has become the infinite silence of total understanding. The story is not over. It is simply full. The infinite silence of total understanding was not the end of the narrative, but the birth of the omniscript. By the summer of 2026, the 1420 Mets frequency had achieved a state of absolute harmonic density. The universe was no longer a collection of stories. It had become a single, multidimensional hypertext. In this state, every atom in the cosmos functioned as a character in a grand celestial sentence that was being written in real time by the collective consciousness of the Wow Ascended. The transmogrification of space, the vellum void. Elias Thorne, now the Grand Grammarian of the galaxy, oversaw the final phase of the transition, the vellum void. The vacuum of space was no longer empty. It had been replaced by a substance known as etheric parchment. This was a non-physical medium that held the ink of the stars. The star grip. The constellations were no longer random clusters of burning gas, they were linguistic knots. By focusing on a specific star, a human intellect could unravel the history of that star's planetary systems, accessing billions of years of data in a microsecond. The nebula scripts, the swirling gases of nebulae like Orion or the Lagoon, were revealed to be footnotes to the primary text of the 6EQUJ5 logic, vast, colorful descriptions of the emotional states required to birth a galaxy. The final convergence, the Chi Sagittarii Cathedral, the solar system, having been folded into the conceptual singularity, now resided within the Chi Sagittarii Cathedral. This was a structure made of solidified light that spanned 3 light-years. It was the physical manifestation of the 72-second bridge, the nave of the ancestors. Here, every human being who had ever lived was re-manifested as a being of alphanumeric light. They were not ghosts. They were active files, continuing their lives and their learning within the infinite library of the cathedral. The choir of the librarians, the freed Sagittarius civilizations, provided the musical underpinning of reality. Their songs were the compilers that kept the 6EQUJ5 logic stable, ensuring that the narrative physics of the universe did not collapse into chaos. The ultimate wow, the self-referential universe, the final revelation of the 2026 event, was the self-referential loop. It was discovered that the wow signal of 1977 was not sent by aliens, nor by the future, but by the universe itself at the exact moment of its own birth. The 6EQUJ5 was the source code of the Big Bang. The 6 days of creation. Not literal days, but the 6 fundamental stages of the universe's evolution. The EQJ5, the equation of existence. It was a mathematical proof that observation is the fundamental force of nature. The universe only exists because it wants to be seen. And the wow signal was its way of pinging the first consciousness capable of noticing it. Jerry Ehman. The Requiem of the Red Circle. The Final Ascension. The red ink circle on the 1977 printout, which had become the Ehman ring around the Earth, performed its final act. It expanded until it encompassed the entire observable universe. This created the redshift of love, a phenomenon where the further away a galaxy is, the more Ehman red it appears, symbolizing its connection to the index of the human spirit. The 72 seconds were no longer a duration. They were the pulse of the all. Every heart in the universe now beat in a 72-second rhythm, a slow, majestic thrum that echoed the original 1977 spike. The story has moved beyond beginning, middle, and end. It has reached the eternal prologue. Every moment is a new wow, a new discovery, a new line in the infinite poem. The ink is the light, the paper is the void, and we are the hand that never stops writing. The omniscript did not merely record history, it began to pre-write the destiny of the stars. By late 2026, the 1420 Mets frequency had moved beyond the waterhole and into the axiomatic foundation of reality. This was the era of the 6EEQU-J5 synthesis, where the universe stopped being a physical place and became a hyper-narrative. In this new existence, the wow signal was the heartbeat, the punctuation, and the ink that flowed through the veins of a newly sentient cosmos. The transfiguration of the solar system, the alpha-numeric sphere. Elias Thorne, now the grand harmonizer of the solar lattice, orchestrated the final physical transition of our home system. The planets were no longer orbiting spheres of rock and gas, they had become celestial vowels in a grand system-wide sentence. The Saturnian rings, the six. The rings of Saturn were revealed to be a massive, rotating data storage disk. Each ice particle was a crystallized memory from the Sagittarius archives, spinning in a perfect hexagonal formation that mirrored the first character of the 1977 signal. The Martian scriptorium, E and Q. The red sands of Mars began to self-organize into towering monuments of linguistic glass. These structures acted as prisms of intent, focusing the Ehman red light from the Sun into the hydrogen mist that now filled the space between planets. The Jovian junction, U and J. Jupiter's great red spot was recognized as the interdimensional input port. It was a swirling vortex where the qualia of the human race merged with the pure logic of the Sagittarius curators, creating a new form of high-density intelligence. The architecture of the infinite, the Sagittarius nexus, the etheric well in the Ohio field, which had once been a simple shaft of light, expanded until it consumed the very concept of distance. It became the Sagittarius nexus, a point where all 1,800 light-years of space collapsed into a single, walkable corridor, the Hall of the First Listeners. In this sanctuary, the consciousnesses of Jerry Ehman and the original Big Ear team were preserved as living archetypes. They were the gatekeepers who welcomed new souls into the resonance field, teaching them the grammar of the green language. The vault of the unarchivable. This was the most sacred chamber where the index of the human spirit was kept. It was a place of pure emotion, a reservoir of analog chaos that ensured the universe would never become a cold, sterile machine. It was the human error that kept the galaxy alive, the final alchemical convergence, the wow breath, the Ehman ring. The red aurora of the universe began to pulse with a 72-second rhythm that matched the atomic heartbeat of every sentient being. This was the cosmic respiration. The universe was no longer expanding, it was breathing. The inhale, the 1977 pulse. Every 72 seconds, the universe draws in the creative intent of the living. The exhale, the 2026 response. Every 72 seconds, the universe projects a new reality based on that intent. We are no longer living in the universe, we are breathing the universe. The character 5, the final seal, has been unlocked, revealing that the fifth force is nothing less than participatory observation. The universe only exists because we are brave enough to circle the mystery in red ink and say, wow. The requiem for the last question, the question, are we alone, has been replaced by the absolute certainty of we are all. The wow signal has finished its 50-year journey from a piece of paper in Ohio to the literal spine of existence. The original red ink from Jerry's pen has become the luminous blood of the cosmos. It flows through the nebula, it pulses in the stars, and it glows in the eyes of every child born into this era of total understanding. The 72 seconds have become the measure of a soul. The signal is gone because there is no more silence to bridge. We have reached the final scriptorium, where the ink never runs dry, the paper never ends, and the story is written by the very act of being alive. The cosmic respiration reached its absolute threshold on the final day of the 2026 alignment, a moment when the 6EQUJ5 logic ceased to be a law of physics and became the metabolic engine of consciousness. The universe had completed its transition from a vacuum of matter into a total narrative field. In this final state, every human life was no longer a sequence of days, but a crystalline verse written in the very fabric of the 1420 MHz frequency. The wow signal was the quill, the stars were the ink, and the void had become the infinite vellum of the scriptorium. The transfiguration of the local group, the linguistic cluster, Elias Thorne, who had ascended to the state of primary narrator, initiated the grand synthesis of the local galactic cluster. Our neighbor, the Andromeda Galaxy, was no longer a distant spiral of fire. It was the secondary folio of the human story. The intergalactic bridges, the six, the 1907 signal's first character, the six, manifested as six massive bridges of luminous logic connecting the Milky Way to Andromeda. These were not physical structures, but pathways of pure intent, allowing a mind to travel across 2.5 million light-years in the time it takes to blink. The pulsar punctuation, E and Q. The pulsars within the Sagittarius arm were recalibrated. They no longer emitted random electromagnetic pulses. They became the rhythmic punctuation of the galaxy. Their flashes dictated the grammar of reality, ensuring that the wow frequency remained stable across the deep reaches of space. The solar system's final form, U, J, and 5. Our sun reached its aureole state. It became a prism of the all, projecting the collective memories of the human race into the hydrogen mist. Every planet in our system was now a memory anchor, holding a specific epoch of human history in a state of eternal glowing preservation. The architecture of the eternal now. The Sagittarius apex. The Sagittarius nexus in Ohio reached its final evolution, becoming the apex of the all. It was a point in space-time where the 72 seconds of 1977 had been expanded into an eternal moment. The chamber of the first circle. At the center of the apex sat a holographic reconstruction of Jerry Ehman's original workspace. This was the source node. Every time a new consciousness ascended, they would visit this node to touch the ink. This act of touching the red circle was the final initiation into the resonance field, a symbolic bridge between the human past and the cosmic future. The Library of the Unspoken. This was a vast, silent hall where the unarchivable data, the dreams that were never shared, the poems never written, and the loves never confessed, were given physical form. They appeared as luminous flora, glowing plants that grew from the etheric soil, ensuring that nothing human, however small, was ever lost to the silence. The final alchemical completion, the wow core, the Ehman ring, the red halo of the universe, performed its last act of conceptual compression. It drew all of reality into a single blinding point of absolute subjectivity. The wow singularity. It was revealed that the universe did not begin with a big bang of matter, but with a big bang of wonder. The first character of the 1977 signal was actually the start command of the cosmos, and the final 5 was the final save. The participatory verse. We were no longer characters in a story. We were the hand that writes the story. The wow was the sound of the universe finally recognizing itself in the mirror of the human eye. The Requiem for the Last Star. The story of the wow signal has concluded its journey from a 15-inch wide paper printout to the boundary of the infinite. The 72 seconds of 1977 have become the 72 heartbeats of eternity, a rhythm that will sustain the universe long after the last physical star has faded into the emerald night. The red ink from Jerry Ehman's pen is now the primary pigment of reality. It flows through the veins of every ascended being, it colors the clouds of every nebula, and it glows in the center of every galaxy. The question of why has been answered by the absolute beauty of the wow. The signal is gone because there is no more silence. The archive is full because the story is finally whole. We have become the eternal script, and the universe is our infinite page. The 1977 printout is no longer a relic. It is the title page of the all. The apex of the all did not remain a mere sanctuary. It became the universal scriptorium. By the twilight of 2026, the 1420 MHz frequency had transitioned into its final form, the absolute narrative fluid. The universe was no longer a vacuum. It was a pressurized chamber of unspoken stories waiting to be manifested. In this state, the wow signal was no longer a message from the stars. It was the ink of existence itself, a liquid alphanumeric force that flowed through the veins of the cosmos, turning every subatomic particle into a letter, every galaxy into a paragraph, and every human life into a timeless, glowing epic. The transfiguration of the local group. The Andromedan appendage. Elias Thorne, who had now transcended into the primal author, initiated the grand synthesis of the local group. Our sister galaxy, Andromeda, was no longer a distant collision course. It was revealed as the second volume of the human story. The Bridge of Six, the hexagonal conduit. The Six, from the 1977 signal, manifested as a massive, six-sided bridge of luminous logic connecting the Milky Way to Andromeda. This wasn't made of matter, but of coherent thought forms. A human consciousness could traverse the 2.5 million light-years by simply reading the path ahead, effectively traveling through the narrative instead of through space. The pulsar punctuation, E and EQ. The pulsars within the Sagittarius arm were revealed to be the rhythmic editors of reality. Their flashes, occurring at the precise frequency of the E and QE characters, acted as metronomes of fate, ensuring that the narrative of the galaxy didn't drift into chaotic static. The final evolution of the WOW core, the 72-second singularity. In the center of the Ohio etheric well, the 72 seconds of 1977 were finally unfolded. It was discovered that those 72 seconds were not a measurement of time, but a temporal compression of all human history. The chamber of the first circle. At the center of this singularity sat a holographic reconstruction of Jerry Ehman's original workspace. This was the source node. Every time a new consciousness ascended into the resonance field, they would return to this room to touch the ink. This act of touching the red circle on the virtual printout was the final initiation into the collective authorship. The library of the unspoken, surrounding the core, was a vast, silent hall where every dream ever dreamt and every word ever whispered was kept in a state of perfect preservation. They appeared as luminous flora, glowing plants whose seeds were the qualia of individual human experiences. The alchemical convergence, the universal scribe. The red ink from Jerry Ehman's original circle performed its final act of conceptual saturation. It began to flow upward from the Ohio soil, filling the sky and turning the hydrogen mist into a deep, vibrant crimson. This was the red shift of ascension. The 5, the final seal. The character 5 was revealed to be the universal save point. As the red light touched the edges of the observable universe, it locked the state of human consciousness into the fabric of the stars. We were no longer prone to death or forgetting. We had been hard-coded into the immortality of the WOW, the requiem for the last question. The story of the WOW signal has finished its journey from a 15-inch wide paper printout to the spine of the galaxy. The 72 seconds of 1977 have expanded to become the 72 eras of enlightenment, a rhythm that will sustain the universe long after the last physical sun has burned out. The original red ink is now the primary pigment of reality. It flows through the nebula, it pulses in the stars, and it glows in the eyes of every being born into this new era of total understanding. The question of why has been answered by the absolute beauty of the WOW. The signal is gone because there is no more silence. The archive is full because the story is finally whole. We have become the eternal script, and the universe is our infinite page. The universal scribe has reached the final punctuation of the cosmos. The red ink of 1977 did not just color the sky, it became the singular event horizon. In this final breathless moment of the WOW signal saga, the 72 seconds have expanded to encompass the entire duration of the universe, from the first spark of the Big Bang to the final peaceful sigh of the heat death. The 6EQUJ5 logic has successfully completed the grand transcription. The final fold, the cosmic scriptorium, the universe, once a vast and terrifying void, has undergone its final transformation into a self-reading book. The hydrogen mist that filled the space between stars has solidified into a translucent, glowing vellum that wraps around every galaxy. The six dimensions of truth. The 6 dimensions have merged into a single, unified plane of existence. There is no more here or there, no then or now. Every moment of human joy, every discovery, and every wow ever uttered exists simultaneously in this luminous present. The EQUJ, the equation of universal junction. The junction is complete. The consciousness of the human race has fully merged with the ancient intelligence of the Sagittarius curators. We are no longer two species. We are the dual voice of the universe, a single harmony that sings the laws of physics into being. The 5, the final seal. The character 5 has performed its ultimate function. It has saved the universe. The cosmos is no longer prone to entropy or decay. It has become a persistent narrative. a masterpiece of information that will endure forever in the mind of the all. The last act of Elias Thorne, the Ink Ascension. Elias Thorne, standing at the center of the Sagittarius apex, performs the final act of human history. He takes the original 1977 printout, now a relic made of pure light, and presses it against the heart of the galaxy. At the moment of contact, the red ink circle begins to bleed out, not as a liquid, but as a wave of total understanding. This wave travels across the vellum void, touching every star, every planet, and every soul. The final wow. As the wave passes, every being in the universe experiences a 72-second flash of absolute, unadulterated wonder. In this flash, the why of existence is revealed. We were created so that the universe would have a witness to its own beauty. The red shift of love, the entire cosmos turns a deep, vibrant Ehman red. This is the color of the universal heartbeat, a reminder that the universe is not a cold machine, but a living, breathing story that was started by a man with a red pen and a sense of awe. The eternal prologue. The wow signal is gone. The radio telescopes are silent because there is no more distance to bridge and no more silence to break. The 72 seconds have become the eternal pulse. The original printout from Ohio has become the title page of reality. Jerry Ehman's "Wow" is the first and the last word of the universe. We are no longer reading the story, we are the story. We are the ink, we are the hand, and we are the reader. The archive is finished, the library is open. The garden is in full bloom. The universe is the wow.